and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Dr. Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis and produced in the studios of shortwave station WRMI in Miami. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, 100 Years of Wireless and Radio in Bulgaria, Part 2, Early Radio Broadcasting. Focus on Africa, Liberia, and our Philippine DX report. In our continuing series of topics on the 100-year history of wireless and radio in Bulgaria, we come to the story of early radio broadcasting in this Eastern European country. We take this interesting information from all available sources, including Bulgarian sources accessible on the Internet, and radio magazines in Europe and the United States, as well as radio magazines in Australia and New Zealand. The very first radio broadcasting event in Bulgaria took place on September 25th, 1921. At the time, radio broadcasting in any country was still very young, not much more than a couple of years old. As we assemble the story in Bulgaria, this is what happened. The radio event was announced in advance. The German radio station at Nauen, out from Berlin, planned the broadcast of a radio program in German and Russian. According to the available information, engineers in Bulgaria modified a Morse code transmitter in a building near the railway station in Sofia. They received the broadcast from Germany and fed it into the low-power local transmitter in Sofia for rebroadcast. The programming was received best, it is stated, in the Sofia post office and also at the telegraph station located at Kustendil, around 50 miles southwest of Sofia. His Majesty King Boris III donned the antiquated headphones of the day at the Sofia location on this historic occasion and heard the radio broadcast from Germany. 5 years later, a radio club was formed in Sofia, and they announced that they planned to obtain a radio transmitter and put it on the air. However, their intended project was never fulfilled. That was in 1926. Then around 3 years later, plans for two separate radio broadcasting stations were implemented somewhat simultaneously. The first of this pair of radio organizations was a group of military technicians at the local military barracks in Sofia. Under the initiative of George Volkov, they built a simple radio transmitter using two Marconi valves at 80 watts each. The transmitting antenna was a regular wire receiving antenna, 160 feet long and 30 feet high. Electric power for this new facility was provided by a generator attached to a petrol motor. At 9 a.m. on Sunday, November 24th, 1929, this new Radio Sofia was launched on 1429 kilohertz medium wave, though the operating frequency was changed to 857 kilohertz soon afterwards. This first historic inaugural broadcast was composed of recorded music with occasional announcements. A few weeks later, on December 13th, a somewhat regular programming schedule was introduced with evening broadcasts, usually 3 times each week. This era of radio broadcasting in Bulgaria was under the patronage of Professor Asen Zlatarov. As time went by, additional planned programming was presented on air, including agricultural information, children's hour, sports, and language lessons. A few months after the first station, Radio Sofia, was launched, a planned meeting was held for the formation of another radio broadcasting station, Rodno Radio, Homeland Radio. That was on March 30th, 1930. 6 weeks later, the usage of a building at 3 Benkovsky Street was granted to the new Rodno Radio, and they installed their studio and transmission equipment on the second floor. The electronic equipment came from the 1st Engineering Battalion of the Bulgarian Army. This new Rodno Radio, the second radio broadcasting station in Sofia, was inaugurated at 6 p.m. on June 15th, 1930, also a Sunday. Subsequently, the 2-hour programming was on the air 2 or 3 times a week, with 2 kilowatts on the long-wave channel, 105 kilohertz, and it was heard by listeners living in nearby towns with the use of crystal set receivers. On June 6th of the following year, 1931, the name of Rodno Radio was changed to Radio Sofia, apparently indicating the amalgamation of the 2 different radio stations. At the end of that same year, December 31st, His Majesty Tsar Boris III made his first radio broadcast in honor of New Year's Day. A new broadcast transmitter for capital city coverage on 1187 kilohertz was installed at Pavlova during the year 1934. And on January 25th of the following year, 1935, the radio broadcasting station was nationalized and taken over by the government by order of King Boris. Construction work on a new studio building began in 1938 at 4 Dragan Sankov Boulevard, though this facility was not completed for several years. Regional medium wave stations were installed at 2 country locations around the middle of the 1930s. These were Varna, with 15 watts on 1276 kilohertz in 1934, and soon afterwards it increased to 2 kilowatts. And Stara Zagora, with 2 kilowatts on 1402 kilohertz in the year 1936. All 3 of their medium wave stations were incorporated into a radio broadcasting network on May 21st, 1936, with regular relays from the headquarters station in Sofia. It was on Wednesday, October 13th, 1937, that a huge new medium wave station was officially dedicated at Vakarel, 15 miles southeast from Sofia, for nationwide coverage from the one location. Test broadcasts began 6 weeks later on November 17th with 100 kilowatts on 850 kilohertz. At the time of construction, the Blaunox radio tower at 705 feet was the second tallest man-made structure in the world and the tallest in Europe. To this day, it is still the tallest in Bulgaria. On the next occasion, when we take another look at the radio scene in Bulgaria, we will focus on the early shortwave developments in their country.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Wavescan presents Focus on Africa, a year-long series of reports about shortwave broadcasting and listening on the African continent. You may have recognized the voice of Alan Graham in the Wavescan ID that we played a moment ago. Many shortwave listeners will remember Alan as the host of the DX Party Line program on HCJB from Quito, Ecuador, until the program ended in 2011. Alan now teaches radio production classes for HCJB at schools and stations in many countries. He's currently doing so in Liberia, West Africa. Recently, Alan Graham stopped by our Wavescan studios here in Miami en route from Ecuador to Liberia, and we had a chance to talk with him about his work in Liberia. Alan, you've been to Liberia, 3 times now?
Correct.
Okay, and what is the project that you've been working on there?
Well, HCJB, through our Sub-Sahara Africa office in Ghana, works with a number of different organizations in West Africa. And one of our partners is the ABC University, or African Bible College University, which is in Yakepa. It's about 7 hours inland from Monrovia, the capital. And at ABCU, they have a mass communications department. And then in April of 2012, launched a local FM station that is serving the community there where the university is, with the hopes of actually being able to someday have the transmitter and the antenna on one of the mountains where one of the cell operators is, and that will give us a much wider coverage of most of what's called Nimba County where we're at. So we partner with ABC University, with the mass communications, and then also with Life 95.7, which is the radio station there.
Okay, so it's a local FM now. How much power is it running?
Running 600 watts. 600 so watts, okay. It's a rather modest broadcast station.
But how big is this town?
Yekepa is a town of about 15,000 people, so we're covering all of Yekepa, and then we still cover was probably about a 20-kilometer radius even from there. Mm-hmm. So, and that's just using the antenna, which is right there on the campus. Not a whole lot of height, and still we really get obviously good signal into that area.
And what kind of programming is on the station?
Well, the students are the ones that produce the programs. We're actually using some programs that come in from two of the other ABC campuses in Malawi and Uganda. We get some programs in from there, but it's basically just a lot of music. When we did the research in 2012, looking to, because before the station went on the air, we needed to find out who our potential listeners would be and what kind of background they have. We found that there were 16 different languages that were listed as first languages among our listening audience, and then a number also as the second language. Now, English is the most common language, so that's what most of the broadcasts are in, but still we have other short segments that are done in the majority of the other tribal languages, and even some in French, because where we are, it's literally a 30-minute walk from the campus to the border going into Guinea. And so we get a pretty good signal into one of the communities that's just on the other side of Guinea.
Interesting.
So, if you're familiar biblical to the terms of a Tower of Babel, we basically have it all right there at Life 95.7.
All right. Is there religious content then on the station? Or?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
But again, most of what we're doing locally is more music, because, again, from what we did in our research, that's what people wanted the most, was music. And so that's what we try and give them. And then also now trying to develop how we can do more news content, either get news from Monrovia or news from other services that are widely developed outside of the Monrovia area. And so it's a bit of a challenge, but we also know that that's one of the needs. And so that's one of the other areas that we're working on.
What is the current political status of Liberia these days? I mean, it's had some problems in the past, but I understand it's more stable these days.
Definitely much more stable. The president was reelected for a second term. The inauguration was in January of 2012. So I think the fact that you have an incumbent president that was reelected to be able to continue to serve, if I remember correctly, they're 5-year terms, and shows that there is that stability coming into the country. There's still not necessarily the economic investments from outside of the country. I think a number, those investors are still looking to make sure that stability is coming there. The United Nations still has, Armed Forces still has presence throughout the country. And so when you go to different places, you can always see that. Now, I understand that's going to begin to diminish, and I'm sure the same thing that the United Nations was looking to find out, okay, were these last elections going to go? How was the process then of the inauguration? And all that really went quite smoothly, and so now they can begin to retreat also.
Are there any shortwave stations in Liberia now?
Well, ELWA, E-L-W-A, was broadcasting on shortwave. They're, at least at last report, were off the air because of transmitter problems, but their desire is to be able to get that transmitter back online. Even last year they had problems just with the FM because it was in late 2011 when there was a fire there at the studio and took out their FM. So their priority was to get that FM signal back up for the Monrovia area, and their desire is to then be able to have shortwave back on the air too.
A lot of long-time shortwave listeners, such as myself, can remember years and years ago ELWA being on shortwave.
Mm-hmm. ELWA, in terms of how we look at it, is kind of like the HCJB of Africa. Mm-hmm. They were the pioneer shortwave Christian broadcaster for Africa, and that's why it was it was special for us as a mission to be able to send out an emergency request to many of our donors and help raise the funds to build a new FM studio.
And even though there's no shortwave on the air now at this time from Liberia, is shortwave listening popular at all in Liberia?
I think shortwave is still popular. When I was in Liberia between January and May of 2012, I had several opportunities to go out and spend weekends in some of the communities, and there was a lot of listening to stations like Unmill Radio, which is on an FM on a number of repeater stations throughout Liberia, but also shortwave that was being broadcast into Liberia, simply because there are no other media that's available. There's no television in these areas. Obviously there could be satellite, but there's no electricity, and so battery-operated radios is what the people use. And I want to say most, maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but at least a good number of the radios that I saw where families were listening as a family group together were shortwave capable. Mm-hmm. And I know many times you could hear where they're listening to BBC. And so yes, it's still used, at least in West Africa and Liberia.
And so I guess we can assume that there's not a whole lot of online radio listening going on.
No. At the campus for African Bible College University, we have fairly good internet service, not like you would have here in Miami or in maybe other places, but still it was fairly good, fairly reliable, and definitely much better than even within the community of Yekepa. But once you get out of Yekepa, there's nothing. Even one of the major cities there, a lot bigger than Yekepa, called Ganta, has one cyber cafe, and it has 2 computers. And the speed from, I have not used them, but what one of my students called it, is slower than dial-up. So not that most people would even remember what dial-up is, but if you do, even a slower speed than that. And then once you get out into the villages, there is no internet whatsoever.
That was Alan Graham of HCJB talking with us about shortwave listening and his work in the West African nation of Liberia. And if you happen to be in the Yekepa, Liberia area, you might hear Alan doing the identification on Life FM.
Broadcasting from ABC University in Nimba County, this is Life 95.7, Yekepa, Liberia.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. And our national anthem for this week is the Anthem of Liberia. National Anthem of Liberia on Wavescan. And next we go to the Philippines with our DX report from Henry Umaray.
Happy New Year, everyone, to the dear shortwave listeners. Good evening, good morning, wherever you're welcome to the January 13th edition of the Philippine DX News. This is report number 71. I'm Henry Umaray in Antique, Central Philippines. Glad to be back, and thank you for listening. Let me thank our DXR friends for the reception report and for keeping in touch. B12 schedule Radyo Pilipinas Overseas Service, 1730 to 1930, 9395, 11720, and 15190 kilohertz. Vatican Radio in English to Asia, 0140 20200, 7410, and 9560 kilohertz. KTWR Transworld Radio, 0850 to 0930, 15200, Monday to Friday, 1000 to 1030, 11840, Monday to Saturday, 14 to 1535, 15225 kilohertz daily. Adventist World Radio in various Philippine languages, Tagalog, Ilonggo, Cebuano, and Ilocano, 1030 to 1100, 17540 kilohertz. WYFR Family Radio in English, 1000 to 1100, 9465, 1300 to 1400, 11540, and 14 to 1535, UTC 15225 kilohertz. Reception logs for December 2012. December 1, Voice of America on 15150 in English at 2210, SIO 444. December 4, HJB Global, Australia on 15340 in English at 1500, SIO 443. December 6, KBS World Radio on 9640 in English at 1610, SIO 555. December 6, China Radio International on 11955 in Filipino from Beijing at 1030, SIO 444. December 7, Adventist World Radio on 15255 in English from Trincomalee at 1530, SIO 333. December 8, Voice of Mongolia on 9655 in English from Ulaan Batar at 1531, SIO 333. December 8, Radio Thailand on 9720 from Odantani in English at 1250, SIO 444. December 10, Radio Exterior de España on 11910 from Noblejas in Spanish at 1230, SIO 443. December 10, Radio Kuwait Filipino Service on 15540 from Cab at 1045, SIO 443. December 13, Voice of Russia on 11840 in English at 1432, SIO 444. December 13, WYFR Family Radio on 9465 in English from Tashkent at 1250, SIO 333. December 14, Voice of America on 12150 in English from Tinang at 1250, SIO 444. December 14, Pan American Broadcasting Corporation on 15205 in English from France at 1400, SIO 333. December 14, Adventist World Radio on 11740 from Agat, Guam in English at 1630, SIO 444. December 23, Voice of Vietnam on 12020 from Santay in English at 1250, SIO 333. And December 23, Vival Voice on 15470 in English at 1440, SIO 333. We have a special QSL card just for you. For your reception report, please send 1 IRC International Reply Coupon or $2 US return postage will be greatly appreciated. And friends, if you want to get the transcript of today's Pilipinas DX News and see our QSL card series, please visit http://filipinasdx.wordpress.com. That's http://filipinasdx.wordpress.com or http://filipinasdx.blogspot.com. Follow us also on Facebook, facebook.com/FilipinasDX, or you may want to send us your comments, suggestions, reception logs, and informations to filipinasdx@yahoo.com. That's PILIPINASDX for filipinasdx@yahoo.com. This has been Henry Omanay for Ways Caniniticas Central Philippines saying mabuhay at maraming salamat po.
And finally, some sad news from St. Petersburg. All Voice of Russia relays via St. Petersburg, the Krasny Bor Transmitting Center, were stopped on December 31st, 2012 at 2100 UTC after 50 years of broadcasting from Krasny Bor, or as it was also known, Radio Center Number 11. That news from Mikhail Timofeyev and DX Explorer via the Danish Shortwave Club International. We note on the Voice of Russia website that as of January 1st, the station has ended all of its English-language shortwave transmissions to North America and Europe, except for 8 hours per day in DRM only to Europe. The Voice of Russia is also maintaining 4 hours per day in English to Latin America on shortwave, regular analog shortwave, from 2200 to midnight UTC on 9395 kHz, and from midnight to 0400 UTC on 7290 kHz. Of course, the Voice of Russia can also be heard in North America and Europe on the Internet. And we have late word from Paco Rubio of the Barcelona DX Association that since January 1st, the Voice of Russia is only broadcasting in Spanish to Spain from 2000 to 2100 UTC in DRM only on the frequency of 6,000 kilohertz. It was heard with good quality in Barcelona. He says the Portuguese program to Europe from Voice of Russia is also now only in DRM on the same frequency of 6,000 kilohertz during the following hour from 2100 UTC. And in Italian, they're only broadcasting on medium wave and in DRM at 1700 hours on 6145 kilohertz. So in summary, the Voice of Russia is betting on DRM for Europe. In total, they're transmitting in DRM 21 hours per day in 9 languages, says Paco Rubio. Maren Cassell ends our program today with some Liberian gospel music. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the weekly DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written by Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis. Next week, the final episode in the story of radio broadcasting in Afghanistan, the story of the Indian shortwave transmitter, also European perspective, and our Bangladesh DX report. If you'd like a Wavescan QSL card, you can send your reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. We'd like to hear from you at wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Miami. Till next week, good listening, everyone.
But today, I hear noise from